For those of you who might not know who I am, my name is Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna, and I have the joy, thank you, I have the joy and privilege of representing Florida's 13th Congressional District in Pinellas County. Thank you, thank you. But you know, standing here today, when I initially started out, I never envisioned that I would have a career in politics. I did not come from a particularly political family. I was born to a very young single mom. My dad was in and out of jail. By the time I had been maybe around 10 years old, I'd walked into an armed robbery. I had a cousin that was murdered. I'd attended multiple high schools, one of which there was a gang shooting on campus. And for all argument's sakes, according to statistics, I probably should have been a high school dropout, teen mom, and on drugs. But at 19, I joined the military, which truly was the best decision of my life. It's where I met my husband, Andy, and it's where I was, thank you, and it's where I was able to put myself through college. Eventually, I ended up taking the MCAT twice and had this goal and objective of becoming a military physician. But it was during my gap year when I was volunteering as a counter-trafficking activist that I really had my turning point moment. You see, prior to 2016, then candidate Trump was talking about the correlation with an open border and human trafficking. And I think most people will agree that open borders hurts people on both sides. Here I was, a female Hispanic veteran, granddaughter of immigrants, and I argued that it wasn't racist or xenophobic to want border security, yet I was called a race traitor. They would actually always make fun of me and call me a coconut. It means that you're brown on the outside or white on the inside, of which I would always respond, well, I'm more like a vanilla wafer, and that seemed to really tick them off. But in my opinion, if you're given a position of power or a platform and you don't speak out against injustices, you're just as complicit as the injustice that occurred. And I noticed something. I saw that the media was lying. I kept seeing these images of women and children, yet the very same media outlets weren't talking about the rape, the trafficking, whether it was labor for sexual purposes that was taking place. I made a video like any good millennial will do, and it went pretty viral, talking about why I believed in border security and why I supported President Trump. And eventually I was invited to an event called the Young Women's Leadership Summit, which if you've been there today, shout out to all the women in the audience. It was at that event I realized I wasn't the only one. And shortly thereafter, I kid you not, one day before I was supposed to go to medical school, Charlie Kirk calls me and says, "Hi, Anna, my name's Charlie Kirk, and I'd like to offer you the job as the National Hispanic Outreach Director for Turning Point USA." So I literally, thank you. I had 24 hours to decide what I was going to do. Was I going to go down one path, which was medicine, or was I going to go down a very different path that seemed like I was being pushed in the direction of politics? And after thinking about it and talking to one of my mentors, I realized that I could help people in a way that I probably could have never dreamed of through medicine, and that was through legislation. The impact and the reach I would be able to have, I could actually potentially bring the change and be the change that I wanted to see happen in this country. So in 2020, I decided to run for office. And in 2020, I was not successful, but when you fail, you try again, and you will be successful, I promise you that. Everyone remembers that BLM was a summer of love, and I promise you, I'm not just telling you this to bore you, I'm not just telling you this to make you feel bad about the life and circumstances which I was born into, but this all correlates, because when you're in your biggest struggles, I do believe it's God putting you there, preparing you for something. In 2022, despite being outspent $12 million to one, having my own party back a pedophile defense attorney against me, I won my election. And it was a massive learning curve. You would think that when you go to Congress that they send you there and they want to teach you how to legislate and they want to teach you how to put forward and do the right thing, but they don't. They want you to go up there, go to the lobbyist parties, they wine and dine you, but they don't actually want you to advocate and do what you promised to do on the campaign trail. So I read the rule manual. It's crazy what happens when you read books. Read it multiple times, in fact. And shortly after getting elected, I had this egregious hit piece come out from the Washington Post. Just real quick, how do we feel about the Washington Post? I told you a little bit earlier about the background in which I came from, and this hit piece tried to discredit everything about my life. They try to say that I was a registered Democrat in the state of Washington, of which they had to retract because that was provably false. They actually were able to access my military records as a sitting member of Congress, contact my old supervisors trying to dig up dirt on me. They reached out to my mom and asked for proof of death that my grandmother passed away HIV positive. They even went as far as saying that I made up my father's incarceration record. Little did they know that I had receipts for all of that, but they didn't want to print the truth because people like me on the left, we're not supposed to exist. We're supposed to be Democrats, we're supposed to be leftists, and we're supposed to embrace, especially if you're Hispanic, we are supposed to embrace open borders. They want us to pretend that all Hispanics are legal and say nothing about labor trafficking or child trafficking affecting our communities. And I'm not going to be silent on that matter. Had that article not come out, had I not have the facts to back me, Time magazine would never investigate it, and even though their hit piece was meant to destroy me, it actually ended up empowering me. In fact, Time magazine named me as the next 100 most influential people in the world next to J.D. Vance. In that same congressional cycle, so in the 118th Congress, I was the member of Congress that censured Adam Schiff for his hoax in the Russia collusion and going after President Donald Trump. And I was also the member that led the fight against Merrick Garland, a corrupt attorney general who protected Joe Biden in his cognitive decline, and 4 Republicans voted against holding Merrick Garland in inherent contempt. It just goes to prove the corruption that we have within our own party that needs to be flushed. Drain the swamp indeed, and the swamp is real, I promise you that. In 2024, because of my work and efforts in the previous Congress, I was charged with a task force to investigate some of the most grisly crimes in U.S. history, starting out with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. What I can tell you, and I would say that this model of transparency in the declassification of the JFK records is literally what they should be doing with Jeffrey Epstein. The administration released tens of thousands of documents, and I will say credit due where it's deserved. The CIA director, Radcliffe, was the only CIA director in U.S. history who was able to release something called the Joe Neady's files. What this file proved, and it had been hidden for over 60 years, was without a doubt, and this is not my analysis, this is not my opinion, this is based on evidence that we have backings on. Without a doubt, the CIA engaged in a cover-up of the JFK assassination. The CIA lied to Congress. Joe Neady's, who was a CIA operative, did indeed have contact and was observing Lee Harvey Oswald, who in my opinion was a patsy and cover for multiple shooters in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. If you would have said that last year, a couple years ago, they would have called you a conspiracy theorist. Yet every single person in this room knows conspiracy theory is only a matter of time before it's proven correct. See, for most members of Congress, their job is just to vote. But for me, it's far much more than that. It is to weed out the systemic corruption infecting the cancer on this country. And the only way that you can do it, you don't make peace with evil, you don't make peace with corruption, you destroy it. Which brings me to my next thing. These LA riots, these anti-ICE riots. When I saw those, I looked at this from an activist perspective. Who's funding these riots? Where are they coming from? Right? Follow the money trail. Now, credit due where it's deserved, because I don't believe that this woman deserves enough credit, but there are 2 people that actually helped flush out these connections on the financial ties. The first one is an individual by the name of Data Republican. Her name's Jenica on X. And the other person who I think probably might be here today is Laura Loomer. Now I want to tell you what I learned. And when we were able to discover some of the work of these citizen journalists, we were able to actually send out letters requesting testimony, and I'll get to that in a second, to an individual by the name of Neville Singham. Now, when you look at Neville Singham's background, he's a billionaire Marxist who was made a billionaire by taking money from the Communist Chinese Party. The money then transferred from the CCP to an organization called the Party for Socialism and Liberation, of which then turned around and organized these anti-ICE riots. But why all of a sudden Mexican flags? Do you guys remember the Summer of Love and these mostly peaceful riots? They were BLM flags. In fact, the Democrat Party used a dead black man by the name of George Floyd to fundraise for their 2020 election, and no one wants to talk about that. The main difference between that and then is nothing, just a different flag. And in fact, they're doing the same thing. They're using the guise of targeting people based on race, social, economic class, changing the flags, fundraising off of it, and using it for political talking points. It's not really about immigrants. It's not really about protecting innocent people. It's not about women and children. And as you saw on some of these farm raids that just took place yesterday in California, our own government was able to free multiple children that were being hired to work on these, not even hired, they were being forced to work on these farms. And I think everyone in this room will agree that child labor and exploitation is unacceptable in a free country. Now, what I will say is there's a really good movie. Who's seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven? Okay, if you guys haven't seen that movie, you really need to watch it. It's a great movie. But there's a quote in that movie, and it really resonates with me. It says, "Your soul is yours keeping alone. Even those who presume to play you be kings or men of power. When you stand before God, you cannot say, 'But I was told by others to do thus,' for their virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice. Remember that." It means that every single person here has a choice to do the right thing. It doesn't matter what position you're at, but if you're in a position of power and you choose to not do the right thing, watch out. See, this party is no longer our grandfather's GOP. We've changed, and I think that that's evident. We are the People's Party. We value truth and understand that only through transparency can that be accomplished through trust. We defend the Second Amendment. We understand that children are a blessing, and the backbone of a strong country is the nuclear family. We understand that forever wars only hurt us, and that it is only truly accomplished with peace through strength. We embrace the famous words of one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. It is your responsibility and obligation to stay in the fight, to rise to the occasion and be our next generation of leaders and fighters. Thank you. I'm not the only one that needs you. This country needs you. And I can tell you that based on what I've seen in Washington, D.C., I can promise you I'm not going to be there in the next 20 years. I don't want to. It's corrupt, and we need your help to truly drain the swamp. Together, we will keep this country great. Turning Point's just informed me, too, that I have a couple minutes to take some questions from the crowd, so I'm going to be opening it up to you guys in a minute. But I do want to say this. I didn't do this job because it was convenient. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's incredibly hard. It's a big sacrifice for the family, but I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Because right now, we need young leaders who will speak the truth, sometimes calling out our own party. If we don't have your voice, we will lose this country, and you're seeing that with some of the elections taking place around this country. Now, everyone says every election is truly important, but when you see them electing open communists, when you see money coming in from the Communist Chinese Party, when you see systemic government corruption, I'm telling you right now, we need your voice to fight it. God bless all of you. Thank you so much for being here today. God bless the state of Florida, and God bless this great American country. Now, if you guys can please line up here, I'll take some questions from the audience. Right up here, find a microphone, and we'll go from there.
Hi. I really respect all of the work that you've done on the pro-life movement and speaking out against abortion and all of the things that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry is doing against unborn life. I would love for you to speak a bit about the IVF industry and then what that also does for unborn life and what we need to be concerned about with in vitro fertilization.
I actually think that I hold the same position that the president does, and that IVF can be done in a responsible fashion. What I will tell you is that I think the conversation surrounding that, though, right now is very convoluted. In my experience and from what I've heard, when people are being impacted by fertility issues, and this goes into what's in our food product, what people have been exposed through the medical industry and why there's such a big population decline right now. I have actually been one of the few Republicans to co-sponsor legislation on that exact topic. And so I think the whole idea that there is an IVF industrial complex does prevent, I guess, the discussion on if you have a one-to-one embryo transfer and you're respected in that sense, how much of a beautiful thing it can be for actually families that struggle with infertility. But again, it takes a responsible conversation, and I think that we have to not run from those conversations, but have them face to face.
And then on your right, this will be the last question.
Hi, my name is Mayan, and I was wondering if you thought that we would ever have a female president as a female congresswoman.
Yeah, I think that it's going to probably happen in my lifetime, but I think that when someone's running for president, they should not run on the fact that they're just a woman. I think that qualifications get us there. But on that same topic, I do think that there's going to be many Democrat females running for president in the next election cycle, and I think that they're going to run on a few things. I think that they're going to run on immigration. They're going to run on the images of deportations. And so it's going to take everyone, whether or not you're a man or a woman, taking a stand against them and their propaganda machine. I want to take a few more questions, though. There was a lot of young kids lined up, so if that's okay with you guys, if you guys can just, some of the kids that came back over here. Thank you. Spot's on you. Hold on, wait 1 second so there's a mic so they can hear. We'll take 5, so rock, paper, scissors.
Congresswoman Luna, I have a lot of respect for you as a congresswoman because you sponsor legislation that would give child abusers the death penalty. That's a big reason why I respect you. I got a question. What type of work have you done with the Trump administration to crack down on child abusers, especially right near the southern border, and what more is there to be done?
I'm really glad that you asked this question. So what you're not noticing in the press and the media, any mainstream outlet aside from, I think, Fox News and then, of course, some of the independent networks, is this administration has done an incredibly amazing thing in deporting actual rapists, child exploiters, all of it. In fact, just today was announced that they actually found 10,000 of the over 300,000 missing children under the Biden administration. Now, it's not up to the White House, though, for the policy changes. It actually has to come from Congress. And so I'm going to call out my own party. Why have people not got on board to legislation to increase the mandatory minimums for child rapists and pedophiles in this country? Should it not be the platform of the pro-family party and the GOP to do that? So yes, we absolutely have to get aggressive, but there's been a lot of lethargy, and frankly, people who don't want to take tough votes, but in my opinion, pedophiles deserve the death penalty. There's no rehabilitating a predator.
Congresswoman Luna, thank you for all the work you've done on releasing the JFK files and trying to get the Epstein files released. A good friend of yours, Steve Bannon, who I'm also a huge fan of, did an interview with Jeffrey Epstein in 2019, and he recorded almost 15 hours of footage interviewing Jeffrey Epstein. There has never been an interview with Jeffrey Epstein publicly released, except some of the depositions and whatnot. Would you ask Steve Bannon to release this footage now? Because I think it's very relevant and might give us some insight into what Jeffrey Epstein's motivations are and whatnot.
Well, I think you just asked him for us, right? That's actually the first time I'm hearing of that, but yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing that footage, and I think the American people would too.
Moving into the 2026 midterms, how do we get over the trend that the party in the White House loses seats in Congress, and just how do we move forward?
Well, according to the polling I'm seeing, we're not losing any seats. That's I think that's a historical record will reflect that. But again, you know, I feel like 10% of us in Congress do 90% of the work. And so it's our whole goal and objective to push the party into codifying and getting off our bums and actually doing the right thing by maybe doing our jobs in Washington. And so if you guys can continue to help with that message, that would be great. Thank you guys. God bless. We'll talk soon.